My son told me he was glad my wife cheated on me. He said she found someone better. He sat across from me at a restaurant table, looked me straight in the eyes, and said those exact words. I didn't slam the table. I didn't raise my voice. I picked up my water glass, took a slow sip, and said, "You know what, Jake? You might be right about that." His face went sideways, confused, thrown off, like he'd been bracing for a fight and I'd handed him something he didn't know how to hold. Good, because what I did next was something neither he nor his mother saw coming. And it started with one phone call. 24 hours later, he called me back. 28 times in a single day. I counted every one. 23 years. That's how long I was married to Sarah. We met in Columbus, Ohio in the summer of 2001 at a mutual friend's backyard cookout. She was in a yellow sundress arguing about baseball with my buddy Mike like she'd pitched in the majors herself. I thought she was the most alive person I'd ever been near. We got married 18 months later in Granville. It rained all morning and cleared just before we said our vows. I took it as a sign. I was 31 and thought the hardest part of my life was behind me. We built something solid. Not perfect, but real. A house in Westerville with a red maple in the front yard that turned brilliant every October. I worked industrial supply management, not glamorous, but the kind of money that pays for orthodontists and tuitions without anyone losing sleep. I put in long weeks. 60-hour stretches were common. Sarah knew that when she married me. I believed we had an understanding. Our son Jake was born in 2003. Sharp kid, quick with numbers. I coached his Little League team until he was 12, drove him to science fairs, and wrote the check for 4.5 years at Ohio State without flinching. That's what fathers do. I didn't keep a running tally. I didn't think I'd ever need one. I should have seen the cracks. Around 2019, Sarah got deep into what she called her wellness journey. Meditation apps, herbal teas, books with titles like Reclaim Your Authentic Self. Then came the yoga studio, Core and Clarity, down on High Street. She went 3 times a week, then 5. Saturday mornings disappeared. No more farmer's market, no more coffee on the porch. And she kept mentioning the instructor. Not once in passing. Every conversation had him in it. Blake says you should breathe into your discomfort. Blake thinks most people are completely disconnected from their bodies. Blake. Always Blake. Blake Harmon was 27 years old. Sarah was 48. I was 58. He had a jawline like someone who had never worried about a mortgage, and the philosophy of someone who had never paid rent on time. He drove a beat-up Subaru with a Find Your Frequency bumper sticker and rented a room in a shared house near campus. But according to Sarah, Blake had an old soul. He saw her. He was present in ways I apparently wasn't. She told me in November, standing at the kitchen counter, folded her hands and said, "Rick, I think you've been emotionally absent from this marriage for years." I said, "I've worked 60 hours a week for 20 years, so this family never went without." She said, "And that's the whole problem." Then she told me about Blake. Not all of it. Just the emotional connection, the soul recognition. I found out the rest on a Sunday morning in January when I came home early from a canceled work trip. I don't need to describe what I walked into. If you've ever been in a place anywhere close to this, when the air in a room changes and your hands go cold and you understand something in your body before your mind is caught up, you already know. I drove for 2 hours. Ended up parked at a Kroger on Route 161, just sitting in my truck watching people push carts in the rain. I called Mike. He was quiet for a long moment, then he said, "Rick, I hate to say this, but I saw something at the studio back in August and I didn't know how to tell you." August. 4 months he'd been carrying that. I've made peace with it. He didn't know what to do, neither did I. The divorce took 7 months and cost more than money. Sarah's attorney was relentless. She got the house, valued at $420,000, half my pension contributions from the last decade, a cash settlement of $90,000, and the 2019 RAV4 I'd paid off completely 2 years prior. I kept the apartment I'd inherited from my father in Short North, my remaining savings, and my job. I walked out of that courthouse on a Wednesday in June feeling like I'd been turned inside out and asked to smile about it. The thing that hurt more than all the money was Jake. Jake was 25, working at a tech startup, living in the Westerville house with his mother, and before long with Blake, who moved in with the ease of someone whose arrival had been planned long before it was announced. I asked Jake to come stay with me. He said his mom needed him. He said, and I remember this word for word, "You have to see her side, Dad. She felt alone for years." She felt alone. She wasn't the one who came home to an empty house. A month after the divorce finalized, Jake agreed to have lunch. He showed up 20 minutes late and said Blake had been explaining energy meridians and he'd lost track of time. I breathed through it. I asked how he was. He said, face actually lighting up, that living with his mom and Blake had been revelatory. That word, revelatory. Then he let the next part drop like it weighed nothing. Mom and Blake are getting married in 3 months, and I'm going to be the best man. The restaurant kept moving around us, my coffee sitting there like a prop. He asked what I thought. I said I was happy for them. He relaxed. He thought he'd gotten away with something. Then he said it. He leaned forward and said, "Honestly, Dad, I'm glad things worked out this way. Mom found someone who really gets her. Someone better for her than..." He let it trail. He didn't need to finish. "Someone better for her than you." I set my water glass down. I looked at him for a moment. Then I said, "You know what, Jake? You're probably right. I wasn't enough. She found better. You should support her 100%. He blinked like I'd pulled a rug out. "You're... seriously?" "Completely." I stood up, left 2 20s on the table, told him lunch was on me, and walked out. I sat in the parking lot 4 minutes. Then I took out my phone and called my attorney. If you've ever had the floor disappear beneath you, if you've ever sat in a parking lot knowing that everything you thought your life was has been handed back as a mistake, I want you to know that what follows that moment is a choice. Not a dramatic one with a soundtrack. A quiet, cold decision about who you're going to be from here. Subscribe to this channel, because the choice I made next is the part nobody sees coming. My attorney is Dave Kowalski, 4th floor of a building in downtown Columbus. I called him at 2 in the afternoon and was in his office by 4. I brought files I'd been quietly organizing for weeks without letting myself admit what I was preparing them for. Dave listened. When I finished, he leaned back and said, "Rick, this is going to change things with your son permanently." I said, "Jake told me today he was glad his mother cheated on me because she found someone better." Dave put his pen down. "All right, let's get to work." Document 1. I revoked my will. Jake was removed as primary beneficiary. Everything redirected to an educational foundation for first-generation engineering students. And honestly, not purely as punishment, because I actually believed in it. But Jake would know his place in my plans was no longer assumed. Document 2. A $47,000 educational trust I'd been building for his potential graduate school. Canceled. Funds returned to my account. Document 3. The beneficiary on my $2.2 million life insurance policy changed from Jake to my sister's kids. And then document 4. Dave and I went through 7 years of financial records. Down payment on Jake's car, $12,000. His portion of a graduation trip to Europe, $3,400. A rent loan I never called a loan when he moved off campus, $8,000. Credit card balances I'd quietly cleared twice. Tuition supplements every semester. The emergency calls, the "Dad, I'm in a tight spot" texts I always answered without hesitation. 7 years. Grand total before interest, $68,400. With applicable legal interest retroactively calculated, $76,200 and change. Dave drafted a formal demand letter, notarized, registered. 30 days to pay. Non-compliance meant wage garnishment, a lien filing, and reports to all 3 credit bureaus. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in the apartment staring at a water stain on the ceiling that had been there since my father's time, and I asked myself, what kind of man does this? I thought about it for a long time. Then I thought about the word revelatory. I thought about someone better. I got up at 6 in the morning, made coffee, and drove to Westerville. Blake answered the door barefoot, yoga pants, hair up. He looked at me like something his brain hadn't quite classified. "Rick, hey, what brings you out?" "I need to see my son." Sarah appeared behind him. Jake came downstairs annoyed, said he was in the middle of something. I asked if we could speak privately. He said whatever I had to say I could say in front of his family. His family, Blake and Sarah. "Okay," I said, "this is for you." I handed in the envelope. He opened it. I watched his face move through the stages in real time. Confusion, then comprehension, then something close to the floor giving way. "What is this?" "That is a legal accounting of every dollar I've given you over the past 7 years, totaling $68,400 in principal, $76,200 with interest. You have 30 days to pay." Sarah started talking. I turned to her. "You have no standing here, Sarah. This was my money. It went to my son. Now he owes it back." Blake tried to step in, something about healing, about approaching this as a community. I looked at him the way you look at someone offering you a Band-Aid during open-heart surgery. "Blake, save it for class." "I don't have $76,000, Jake said. "Then figure out where to find it. Sell the car, take out a loan, work extra hours, not my problem." "This is revenge." "No, this is a transaction. You told me yesterday that everything with me is about money. You were right. So let's treat our relationship like what it apparently is, a financial arrangement. Page 9 covers the legal consequences of non-payment." I walked out. I drove home. And I waited. Day 1, silence. Day 2, 3 missed calls. I let them ring. Day 3, Jake showed up at my office in a hoodie looking 25 going on 15. "Dad, we have to talk." "Read the document, 27 days. He left. Day 7, Sarah called and said I was being cruel. I told her I'd spent 23 years building something and her son was glad it had been taken from me. Day 14, Blake came to my building. I didn't let him up. Day 21, Jake called 28 times. I sat in my apartment and counted every one. 28 calls. I answered none. Day 23, I picked up. He was crying before he said a word. Not performance crying. The other kind. The kind that has its own momentum whether anyone is listening or not. When he could talk, he told me something he'd been holding for a while. Blake was gone. Had left almost 2 weeks earlier. Packed a bag in the middle of the night, took Sarah's car, my old RAV4, and cleared out a joint savings account he and Sarah had quietly opened together, around $41,000. Apparently, he had another spiritual connection in Cincinnati he'd been cultivating simultaneously. Same playbook, different city. Even through all of it, I felt something for Sarah when I heard that. Not love, nothing close to that. Something sadder. The kind of feeling that comes from knowing someone for 23 years and watching them learn a lesson you already had to learn. I hope she finds her way through it. I genuinely do. Jake said, "Dad, I owe you an apology bigger than I know how to make. I was inside a story that made everything simple. Mom told me her version. Blake reinforced it. I wanted to believe it because it was easier than accepting that my mother made choices that hurt people and wasn't a victim of anything. But you never failed me, not once. Not in any way that actually mattered." He'd sold his car. He had $8,500. He transferred it to my account while we sat there. I watched it arrive on my phone across the table from him. He asked for a payment plan. 6 years, whatever terms I named. I said 6 years, 10% interest, first of every month, no exceptions. One missed payment and the full balance became due immediately. He agreed. He set up the automatic transfer right there on his phone. We didn't hug. We didn't have a big scripted moment where everything resolved. We just sat there, drinking mediocre coffee, and started talking like two people who have something worth salvaging and aren't entirely sure where to begin but know they want to try. That was enough. It was a start. 2 years have passed. Every payment has come in on time, without a single reminder from me. He has his own place now in Clintonville, a few miles from my apartment. We have dinner most weeks. Sarah called me once, about 6 months after Blake disappeared, and apologized. It was a short conversation. I told her I accepted it. I'm still working on meaning it completely. What I know now is that Jake wasn't being cruel that afternoon at the restaurant. He was lost. He'd been handed a narrative where everything was simple. I was the absent one, Sarah was the hero of her own story, and Blake was proof that better things existed. Jake took that narrative because he needed one. I understand that. I've sat with it long enough to understand it. But I also know that sometimes love has to cost something before it's believed. I didn't stop loving my son when I handed him that envelope. I made a decision to stop being invisible. To insist, quietly, legally, with notarized documents and a 30-day deadline, that my presence had meant something. That 23 years of showing up, of working, of building and providing and staying was real. That it had weight. That it could not simply be reclassified as nothing because it was convenient for someone else's story. It had weight. 28 phone calls worth. $8,500 in a first payment's worth. 2 years of dinners worth. That kind of weight doesn't disappear. It just takes time to be recognized. If this story landed somewhere real for you, if you've ever been erased from your own life and handed back a version of yourself you didn't recognize, subscribe. I'm here every week. Leave your story in the comments, wherever you're watching from. I've heard from people all over who've been through something close to this. You are not as alone in it as you think. Like if you believe that real things always find their way back to the surface. I'll see you next week.